Welcome to At the Helm with Adventure Man Dan. Let's start the adventure. Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of At the Helm with Adventure Man Dan, the podcast where I talk about all aspects of the adventure lifestyle. I'm so very honored for you guys to be joining me here today. It is the 4th of January, 2021. Whoop! We made it, folks. We made it through 2020. It was a rough year. But again, I'm recording here on my sailboat adventure board from my editing station. Currently, I'm docked in Fort Pierce, Florida, and it is sunny and the weather is just beautiful. So let's hop right into it. Today, I'm going to be talking about Ciguatera, and more so my experience with Ciguatera, which will be very important later as there really isn't a concise scientific understanding that goes around Ciguatera. It seems to be a bit of a misnomer, and that's going to be a bit of the subject of today's conversation. It isn't just Ciguatera, but how much misinformation there is. So first, a little disclaimer. These are just my experiences and my perspectives on this topic. You need to make your own assessments if you plan on going out there and eating a lot of reef fish, especially in any tropic environment. You need to decide what level of risk you're willing to take. As with any adventures, I am encouraging you to go on. Furthermore, on this particular topic, there are many sources that disagree with one another. So I try to go off of my own experience that I know firsthand, and other resources that I know are a little bit more backed, like the CDC and such. But again, there's a lot of misinformation out there on this topic, and I do want to highlight that I am likely going to get something wrong in this topic here today, because this is a medical topic about something that is not well understood at all. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. What is Ciguatera? Ciguatera is the term most commonly used to describe this foodborne illness that comes from eating fish that have a high concentration of the Ciguatera toxin, or the ciguatoxin. Specifically, fish in tropical environments where you have coral. And I actually believe you need coral in order to get the ciguatoxin. So in order to really understand all of this, we're going to go all the way back down the food chain to where it first starts. And where it first starts is with an algae. And I'm going to absolutely butcher the scientific name for this, but Gamburidiscus toxicus. I hope you all got a good laugh out of that. But anyway, a diaflagellin is also thrown into the mix as well with the name or with the actual bacteria that causes the toxin. I'm not really sure on all that, but long story short, there is this micro marine algae that grows, particularly likes to grow on sick, dead, and decaying coral reef. And it grows there naturally. It's a part of the environment, but it has been talked quite a bit about the human interference, with dumping certain chemicals and whatnot, and just human interaction in general over the last how many hundred years that we've really been pumping CO2 into the atmosphere and such, which causes the sea temperatures to increase, which, as we know, especially on the Great Barrier Reef, has caused a lot of coral bleaching and all that stuff. So anyway, so all this stuff becomes a very good home for this particular marine algae. This marine algae then adheres to it and starts growing on it. And then the natural cycle of the coral reef, these little herbivorous fish, there's a bazillion different types, so there's really no need to name certain herbivorous fish for this. But small herbivorous fish come over and they just start cleaning the reef. They just start plucking away at those little bits of algae, and that's part of their natural diet. And this does not hurt the herbivorous fish. They will do this and they will gather them in large numbers, and before you know it, you've got millions and so on of these small herbivorous fish in certain areas that have a very high concentration of this toxin in their system. But again, it doesn't hurt them. They then get eaten by the bigger predator fish, fish like snapper, hogfish, barracuda, grouper, and so on like that. Remember, reef fish is really very important to note that this is a reef fish thing. I believe, and I'm almost positive on this, that most of your true pelagic fish, mahi-mahi, wahoo, tuna, and so on like that, those fish are not susceptible to this, but I'll go into more of that later. But anyway, so the algae goes to the herbivorous fish. The herbivorous fish pass it on to the predator fish. And in particular, they pass it on to these certain predator fish that have habits that like to stay in a small area. So imagine it like this. There might be 100 square miles of coral reef, let's say, but maybe only 1 square mile has really bad reef on it. Certain fish, certain grouper species or snapper species like to move in a large range, so they may pass through that area and not pick up a whole lot of it. Other fish, like the schoolmaster snapper and the rock hind, which I believe are the two fish that I got it from, they, especially the schoolmaster snapper, likes to stay on one rock, one coral head its whole life. So anyway, so you now have a predator fish that has a high concentration, that's important, a high enough concentration of this ciguatoxin in their body. Now that moves on to the last step, which is us, human consumption. We catch the fish, and the predator fish shows no symptoms, no signs, nothing. It's perfectly healthy. There's no way to tell the difference. We catch the fish, and we cook it, and we eat it. And this ciguatoxin is not temperature sensitive. It doesn't matter how hard you cook it. It doesn't matter if you make it into rubber. Toxin's still going to be there. So we eat it. And for me, I think when I got it, I started, me and my crew, I should say, I had 2 crew members on board, Alejandro and Paulina, and we all started feeling kind of tired and a little sore. That's what we mostly got at that time. And I think that took about 24 hours or so. It was kind of a delayed onset for us. Now, and this does vary how quickly you feel the symptoms. There are some reports saying as soon as 2 hours you feel the symptoms, which, as I understand it, that is soon enough for someone to induce vomiting, but I'll go into more of that later of how to deal with it. So to recap the food chain here that get this into your system, the algae produces the toxin, herbivorous fish eat the toxin, large predator fish eat enough of those herbivorous fish with enough of the concentration. Again, you're passing this concentration up, and then a human eats a fish that has a high enough concentration. You can eat barracuda and be just fine. You could eat really anything out there and be just fine. It is just that certain fish have, for one reason or another, through bad luck, or like I said, through habits, they've gotten a high concentration of this toxin in their system. So anyway, so you eat this, and then you start developing some of the different symptoms. I'm going to be reading some of these symptoms from the ncbi.gov website. They did a pretty comprehensive study on it. I've gone through it a little bit, and I would encourage you to go through as well. I'll set a link for this in the show notes, as well as where I get the rest of my information. But some of the symptoms include, the immediate ones would be gastrointestinal, diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, and abdominal pain. And that's actually kind of good. That's your body's way of trying to flush out this toxin. Your body realizes it has been poisoned and it needs to get it out quickly. So that's actually a good thing. If you were trying to induce vomiting the next day, I can't, and I'm sure science would back me on this, wouldn't make any sense, because at that point you've already digested the fish and it's already in there. Eventually the neurological effects will start to come into play. A very big one is the hot-cold reversal. A lot of people report that. This was like a kind of a temperature difference, headaches, vertigo, weakness, which again, weakness is what me and my crew would have gotten. And I'll talk more about my own dealings with it later. You get the chills, get the sweats, aches and pains, scratchiness, joint pain, really. Joint pain is another telltale sign, which I got later from eating more fish. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. But anyway, the list really does go on actually quite a bit. Wow. I mean, hallucinations, depression, memory, concentration problems. And I've had that for a while, but anyway, giddiness, that's a very interesting one. Eventually down to even cardiovascular, arrhythmia, hypertension. And those can be pretty serious. Now, Ciguatera can kill you, but it is super rare. And if you're listening this far, I hope that I am not making you paranoid. I fully intend on eating more fish, and I did after I had Ciguatera, which again, I'll discuss that later. So I just want to make sure you understand that this is not at all meant to scare you away from eating fish. This isn't my way of trying to get less people, competing with me out there. No, this is just trying to get the information out there so you know. It really, they say Ciguatera probably affects about 50,000 people a year. And the thing about that is how it affects somebody could be very different. So it could be just a mild stomach ache, and you could just be like, oh, just got some gas, that's it. And then other people, like me, and my crew had a noticeable reaction, but it didn't really stop me from doing anything. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the people I interviewed who had gotten it and had gotten it pretty badly, and their symptoms were really, really bad. So anyway, so that gives you kind of a base understanding. Now we know what Ciguatera is, how it gets to us, and now let's talk about detecting it. This, along with trying to destroy it by cooking it, are two of the really big problems because you pretty much simply can't. This is what makes Ciguatera basically a boogeyman. Everybody seems to know the word. A lot of the other sailors I talk to know about it, and they all have a lot of misunderstandings about it. So first off, for detecting it, there are marine institutes that you can pay $500 to test the fish. I would assume they probably test it either in the liver is where there's the highest concentration, as you would imagine. Although it doesn't hurt the fish, the liver still, I guess, takes out and still stores it there. The roe, as well as I've heard, was the head of the fish and the bones and the skin. So if it's a fish I'm worried about, I would never make a fish with fish head soup. Say I did take another rock hind or another schoolmaster snapper, which I would never take another schoolmaster snapper in the Bahamas. I'm just talking to too many locals now. But say I did, I would only eat the fillets and nothing else. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. But anyway, so paying to have it detected, really not that effective. And this is going to get into a bit of a moral dilemma. I hope I don't get too many angry messages from PETA. But the best way I've actually heard to detect this stuff is feed. I would recommend cooking the liver, again, because it has the highest concentration. But feed that to a cat or a dog. Probably one you don't like as much, but either way, feed a small amount to a cat or a dog and see if there's any change in their behavior the next day. So either spearfish your fish or hook and line it, however, get your fish, fillet it up, put it in the fridge, for the next day, and feed the liver to a cat or a dog. And if you notice them, lying down, whimpering, and anything out of the ordinary, that would actually be, as I understand it, the best way to detect it so far. There are some myths that really bother me that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the last way I recommend of sort of detecting, more of a preemptive thing, is talking with the locals. All the locals I talked to in the Bahamas unanimously said they wouldn't eat schoolmaster snapper. And many of the Bahamians love eating barracuda, which most Americans, that I've talked to, sailors and such, have thought that barracuda is the biggest one. But in this particular region, they say it's schoolmaster snapper, and I believe them for this. I really do. So anyway, so some of the myths at detecting them, and I've heard these, and then when I was doing my research here on Wikipedia, I found that there is pretty much the same list for all the different myths and what do they call it? They call it folk remedies, which I absolutely love. Many of these talk about, different absolutely absurd ways to detect the ciguatoxin. And mind you, the CDC has completely debunked this. It just doesn't make any scientific sense. But here are some of the ways that people, and I've posted about this, and I've had many would-be intelligent people post in the comment sections, oh, you need to do these things to detect Ciguatera. It's absolutely not true. It insults my intelligence, and I lose all respect for anybody who believes in any. So here are some of the top myths that I hear. Probably the first one is the anthill and the flies one. That if you take a piece of fish meat and you put it next to an anthill, or if you put a piece of fish meat out and the flies don't go on it, if the ants don't crawl on the fish meat, or if the flies don't go to this piece of fish meat, it has Ciguatera and you shouldn't eat it. It's been completely debunked, and it wouldn't even stand to reason that they would be able to somehow detect it. That would be the difficult part. Or B, that it would even affect their anatomy, since how it doesn't affect fish. I'm not sure if Ciguatera only affects it definitely affects mammals. It definitely affects animals as well. That's why I would recommend, if you really are unsure and you just want a little peace of mind, feed a piece of it to your cat or your dog and see if there's any difference with them. Some of the other ones I've heard is the silver coin in a boiling pot trick, where I think you put the fish head in, or a piece of meat or whatever, into a boiling pot, and you throw a silver coin in, and if a silver coin turns yellow, you throw the fish out. It's no good. It's got Ciguatera. That's just ridiculous. And the other one that I read today was that you take a silver coin and you put it in between the scales of the fish, and if the silver coin turns black, it's got Ciguatera. Yeah, there is no way. If there was a chemical reaction strong enough to do that, it would be highly detectable by some sort of other modern test, or that would just be known, again, by the CDC or SIRA or someone such as that. So please, if you thought these were true, they're not. Stop spreading them. If you hear somebody spread them, tell them they're a moron and to stop spreading it. It basically cannot be detected. That is what is so terrifying and way about Ciguatera. And I suppose the last way, and some islands actually do this, some fishing islands I've heard of in the Caribbean, they just have one person whose job it is just to take a little bite of the fish, just cut a little chunk out here and there and eat it. And if that guy gets sick, everybody in town kind of knows that, that catch and whatnot. I've also heard them talk about months that end with R, months that have R in them, that people won't eat fish during that. There's been no scientific basis for that. I don't believe that the ciguatoxin or the microalgae does or doesn't bloom during then. It's possible. That's one thing I'd love to know more about. But at the moment, I believe it's just a consistent year-long thing. So those are kind of the only ways I'd really recommend to test for it. Otherwise, just being careful of the certain fish. So why don't we go into that a little bit? We're going to talk a little bit about what fish I do recommend eating and don't recommend eating. First off, the list that I believe the Florida Fish and Game says that that can have Ciguatera. And I would also agree with this list as I've talked to quite a few people. So anyway, so here's just a quick short list. And some of these fish are going to be names you're not familiar with because they're from other parts of the world. So this isn't just relating. I got Ciguatera in the Bahamas, but this might be related to fish somewhere else. So moray eel, not many people trying to eat moray eel. I would actually like to try. They're putting that on the list. Barracuda, I think, is probably the one that everybody knows. And I would add to that the Bahamians love barracuda, and I actually don't hear about them getting it from barracuda, but that's subject to further investigation. What I would say, though, is there are different types of barracuda in their habits. There are some barracuda that stay just on the reef, and there are barracudas that prefer to go out and be more like a pelagic fish. Those ones that are out away from the reef, they're eating, other schooling bait fish, similar to that like a mahi-mahi would. Those barracuda would be very safe, in my opinion, to a much larger size. Or in general, people, if they do eat barracuda, they just do it to a smaller size. But barracuda, I think, gets a very, very bad rap over all of this, just because, it's not a sought after fish anyway. And anytime I'm trolling a lure over any sort of reef, you always snag a barracuda. So anyway, grouper has been known for this. I'm not sure if rockhind falls into the grouper family. It probably does. It probably is a smaller one. But I believe I got some Ciguatera from there. Kingfish, for this, I believe that they mean king mackerel. Kingfish is a term for a lot of different fish around the world, but I would assume they mean king mackerel, which, although it is a pelagic fish, I have seen it over the reef, so it would stand to figure that kingfish would be able to get it. Though I haven't heard again from any Bahamians that haven't said that. Jacks. The jack family is a large family. Amberjack, yellowjack, horsejack, big eye horsejack. There's quite a few of them. Crevaljack. So yeah, there's quite a few of them. Crevaljack, for instance, nobody's really trying to eat that fish. It's considered very much so to be a trash fish. I would like to try it one of these days just to put to bed the myth one way or the other. I think there's a lot. I know there's a lot of fish out there that people consider to be trash that are actually very tasty. But with the amberjacks, they do hang out over the reef, so it would stand to figure, and they do have a pretty voracious appetite, so I can see them picking up quite a bit pretty quick. Snapper. Yes, I can 100% confirm this on two accounts, both the Schoolmaster Snapper, where I initially got the Ciguatera, as well as Cubera Snapper. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, and actually got some interesting info on that one. Surgeonfish, that'd be more of a over in the Pacific. That would not be, I do not believe that would be here in the Atlantic on the Caribbean side. Parrotfish, which is interesting. Yeah, they eat the whole reef. I've eaten parrotfish here in the Bahamas and didn't have a problem with it, or should I say, I've been with a lot of Bahamians that would I would spear it and they would be absolutely ecstatic, and they would eat it. And I haven't heard of any Bahamians having problems with parrotfish yet, but it would stand to reason. They're just eating straight coral. Or they're also cleaning the coral themselves. So it'd be interesting to see how much they get. Wrasses. That would include hogfish, which is actually next on the list. That is one that many people actually don't know. And I got a firsthand account from someone, a Bahamian woman, who ate a whole hogfish, which I'll talk more about later. And she got very, very bad Ciguatera from that. Narrow barred Spanish mackerel, kind of covering with the kingfish up there earlier. They can get it. Coral trout, when I spearfished in Australia, especially up along the Barrier Reef, everybody would tell me not to, and same thing with king mackerel as well up there, pretty much the same species as over here. They would say not to eat a king mackerel. I think they said over like 20 kilos was like definitely don't eat it. And I forget what it was for coral trout. They were basically recommending the size, because size does denounce a certain amount of age to it, and the older it is, the longer it's lived, the more time it has to pick up the ciguatoxin. So all that makes a lot of sense. Flowery cod, I simply don't know that fish, but it's on the list. Red emperor, I believe that's in the snapper family. I could be wrong on that, but red emperor is over in Australia. I don't think I ever speared one. I think it was in the waters, but I just don't think that's good enough. So anyway, so those are some of the fish that are on there. And obviously, I mean, they put Jackson snapper and grouper. I mean, that's a lot of species right there. That's a ton of species. And I mean, there's plenty of places in the world where there's amberjacks, and there is zero chance of ciguatera. For instance, New Zealand, yellowtail amberjack there. My favorite fish to spear in the world, and what I have a lot of good photos of. There is simply no chance of getting ciguatera because there is no coral there. So remember that you need to have coral, and you need to have, just talk to people in the area. It needs to be a warmer climate with coral. That's what this ciguatoxin likes to grow in. So anyway, so moving on. Remedies. Once you do get sick from this, if you do notice the symptoms in time, you do want to induce vomiting. That is what you're told to do by the CDC and pretty much every other source, and that also stands to make just common sense. If it's more than, I don't know how many hours, it might not make any sense. The other thing is, if you don't have diarrhea, I hate to say it, but you might want to induce diarrhea. That could actually help quite a bit. Take a lot of laxatives. There is a very short list of things that they recommend that you can have. Activated charcoal is one of those. I actually just bought some online in pill form as kind of like a dietary supplement. And it's something I think I'm going to try out. I don't know if I'm going to take it every day when I'm in the Bahamas, because I intend on living off the ocean again, which is very much so what I am about and like to do. Or if I'll just take it, if I feel like I'm going to get any of the symptoms from ciguatera, and I'll talk about why that sounds ridiculous, but actually makes some sense in a bit. Being hydrated is very big. You basically want to flush the toxin out of your system, either through vomiting, through diarrhea, or through any other way. I do not remember the name of them, but I have heard that a vascular dilator, which would need to be prescribed and admitted by a medical professional, you cannot do that yourself, can do wonders, but again, that'd probably be time sensitive. And the last one, and this actually might be a vascular dilator, mannitol. That has been prescribed quite a bit and has gotten some good press, but they did a double-blind test on it with somebody who, I guess, two people that had ciguatera or more, and they did saline with one and they did the mannitol with the other, and it was proven in a double-blind not to do anything. So I have to discount that. But anyway, again, what makes ciguatera so difficult is the fact that it's hard to detect and it's kind of hard to get rid of. But time in bed, flushing your system, and that's really what worked for me, just kind of a healthy diet. I probably could have stayed a little more hydrated considering I was so active, in hindsight, but it all worked out for me in the end, and I'll talk more about that later. Ways you can make it worse. Yes, you can do things and make it much worse. First thing is being dehydrated, not allowing your system to flush out the toxin. That will make it much, much worse for you. The second one is that I hear quite a bit, and it seems to pan out. CDC, I believe, backed it, and a few other reputable sources, is alcohol. For whatever reason, alcohol not only can make it worse, can make it last longer, but apparently alcohol can actually have and once you get better, I forget the term, but once you get better from it, it can actually bring back the symptoms. Anybody who knows me knows I don't drink alcohol, so wasn't really too worried about that one. And the last way you can make it worse, which I can scientifically confirm because I did it, is eating more fish that have a certain concentration of the toxin. Which, let's dive into. Let's dive into my experience with it. So I was sailing into the Bahamas with Alejandro and Paulina on my boat, two fantastic crew members. And I went spearfishing, and I was in pretty shallow water, lots of coral around. And in hindsight, I wasn't familiar. I think it was either elkhorn or stag coral. I forget which one, or I might even be mispronouncing it. Either way, it looked like the antlers on some sort of a hoofed animal. But anyway, so I dove under some rocks in very, very shallow water. I think I was in like 6 feet of water, because I wanted just a quick fish to bring back for lunch. I mean, just in a straight ocean of table in the truest sense. And what I ended up getting was a schoolmaster snapper. I got it, filleted it, and I believe I actually cooked it with the skin on, which I'm wondering if maybe that was part of the problem of what happened. But either way, we ate it, and the next day we just all slowly started to feel very tired and very, we kind of all had weakness. We didn't get the hot and cold sensitivity. We all had pretty much the exact same symptoms. Um, Only difference was for me mentally, I thought I was just getting lazy, so I started working out more, which I don't know if that did good or bad. And then about a week later, I shot us a rock hind grouper, and that I think did it again. So what I believe I learned from this, and what I've also been told by other people, is that effectively you can eat fish your whole life that have the Ciguatera toxin in them. They just have a low amount of it. Let's just, for an arbitrary number, let's say a point. Let's say most fish in the Caribbean, or in the Bahamas, hogfish, snapper, grouper, let's say they just all have at least 1 point of Ciguatera. And let's say it takes 100 points to get you sick, and your body naturally releases this toxin over time. It apparently takes it a lot longer to release it the more you have, but basically, as I understand it, is you get this toxin, you get this poison when your body takes in a large dose at once. And that's what we believe happened, is that we ate a schoolmaster that probably had like 75 points, let's say, of the toxin. And the rock hind probably also had like 75. And we did it in such close proximity that that's why it gave us the symptoms it did. So that's what happened. And then a little while later, I started hunting these very large Cubera snapper. Now, these things were absolute monsters. To give you an idea, I think they were like 40 pounds plus. They were big fish. They were a lot of fun. And I ate them, and they were delicious. And this was probably about 3 weeks after I had, after we'd speared and eaten the rock hind, so about a month after the schoolmaster. So I still had the symptoms. I could still feel the symptoms with me. I still had the weakness and whatnot, but I bring in the fish, I fillet it, I eat it. And I remember the first one I did was like 30 pounds maybe, or maybe less than that. And, actually, no, the first one I got was like 20 pounds and, of a Cubera snapper. And I don't remember getting any symptoms for that. I just remember, just feeling same as always. And I ate it, and it was delicious. And then about a week later, maybe, or even less than that, I shoot one that's about 35 pounds. Started figuring out how to hunt them more, get a little bit better. And that one, I remember feeling a little bit of knee pain. It was really, really minor. I actually thought it was from the day. And then about another week later, I go to a whole other spot, and twice in a row, I spear a couple 40-plus pound Cubera snappers, 2 of them. And both of those, again, I know I'm a bit of an idiot at this point, but both of them, particularly the second one, I remember getting noticeable knee pain. And it was pretty clear this was Ciguatera. I mean, it was as scientific as I can do it, I suppose. Anyway, so that to me tells me that these monster Cuberas did have the ciguatoxin. And I should mention, by the way, I always gut my fish to see what they eat. That tells me a lot about their habits. And out of those 2 big ones, it was memorable because one of them had a full lobster in its stomach, and the other one had a stingray in its stomach. Both of those species are not known to carry the ciguatoxin because they don't eat the herbivorous fish. I've seen some people, and even some things I've read online, that said that crabs and things can get it. That is not my understanding, unless perhaps it was a crab that was eating directly, the herbivorous crab, which in the Bahamas, I don't know if there is one of. I believe they all are, meat-eating crabs there, and as well lobster. I've never heard of lobster getting it. So lobster is definitely still safe. If you are eating conch in the Bahamas, don't eat too many, but because we're running out of them. But they are safe as well. They don't eat that. That's not part of their diet. So anyway, so the moral of the story is, you can eat fish with Ciguatera your whole life, and you probably have. If you've eaten fish out of the Bahamas, you probably have some very small, completely unnoticeable, harmless amount of Ciguatera in your system. But once you get that, that big dose of it, then your body has a reaction. And from what I've heard, as well, your body does get rid of it very, very slowly. But someone like me who's eaten a lot of fish, especially fish with Ciguatera potentially, and definitely, if I was to eat, let's say a really big cubera, I might have a small reaction to that again. Versus if I was to feed somebody who's from Kansas, who's never seen the ocean before in their life, and their body has none of that toxin in them, they could probably eat the whole fish, maybe even the liver, and their body would be much more effectively resilient to it because their body has none of it. It is not something that you develop a resistance to. However, I've heard some hearsay from some people firsthand that have had it, that makes it interesting to me to think what else it could have. So anyway, after I had these joint pains, I said, okay, time to I did some research, did some research, decided, okay, I'm not going to eat any reef fish for a while. So I ended up, sailing further, and actually I shot a decent size yellowjack, which I made sushi out of, and I ate very hesitantly, but I felt no symptoms whatsoever. It was just delicious. And that leads me to believe that at least that particular yellowjack just didn't really have much or any in it. It was probably eating more fish that were more bait fish and such that were further out there. I still kept that break going. I think I went about a month and a half without eating any reef fish. I would just kind of focus on pelagics. I think lobster season wasn't in, so I couldn't eat any lobsters. I think I found some crab though. I made it work. But towards the end, I ended up shooting a really nice hogfish, which I had decided when I went out with some friends that I was going to eat a reef fish at the end of the day, one way or the other, whatever we speared. I ended up shooting a pretty big hogfish in the Abacos, and no symptoms whatsoever. And we fed a lot of people with it. Nobody had any problems. So again, I just want to say that it is definitely this boogeyman thing, but it's not something that you should be that worried about. So here is my advice to you and what I plan on doing in the future. The biggest one is talk to the locals. If I had talked to the locals, they would have told me, don't eat schoolmaster. They all would have said it, and I just would have been like, okay. And I think I would have been fine. I think the raw kind might have given me a little something, but it wouldn't have been nearly as much. I think it would have been almost unnoticeable. I believe it was the schoolmaster, so I won't touch them. And they're pretty dumb fish. They're pretty easy to spear because they will, especially in the Bahamas, they let you get pretty close. And a 5-pound schoolmaster is an old fish versus a 40-pound cubera is probably younger than that 5-pound schoolmaster, just the way the species work. And again, it goes back to that fish's habit, I believe. That fish, schoolmaster, likes to stay on that one reef, that one spot, versus I've seen cuberas move around quite a bit. I mean, they're big fish too. They have to grow, they have to kind of leave their home. So that'd be the first one. The other one is, I don't have a cat, I don't have a dog, so I can't do any of that stuff. But, it's not a bad idea, maybe, to feed somebody else who isn't likely to have a reaction to it. So even if they did, it would be much less than you would have if you already are SIGA, would be the term for that, SIGA prone, I guess. But do be careful. You don't want to be known for giving away fish because you think it might be poisonous. It's not a good habit to get into. Not really because of Ciguatera, more so because of what I want to do, but I plan on hunting more pelagic fish this next season as I sail into the Bahamas. It's just something I've meant to do for a while. I really enjoy making sushi. I like the art form of it. And I get a little sick of reef fish. I get a little sick of whitefish after a while. I enjoy hunting them, but yeah, I get a little sick of it. So that's kind of what I recommend. If you have a cat or a dog, I know many people have a cat or a dog on board, feed them a little bit. They're probably going to be fine, 1,000 times. And then, maybe 1 in 1,000, they might get a little sick. That's what I'd recommend, but you have to make your own decision on that. Some of the stories that I've heard. Now, these are all, I only know these people so well, so I can't say exactly, but the first person, he's a big guy who I met on Andros in the Bahamas, who is the Fish and Games officer. And he told me that he ate, I believe it was an amberjack, and he tore into it. And he got so sick, he had a fever, and he nearly died. But then he got better. And ever since then, he can eat any fish he wants. And if it does have Ciguatera, he itches a little bit, which is one of the symptoms of Ciguatera. So again, I do believe him. I just think that there isn't enough research, enough hard evidence out there on Ciguatera. The fact that we can't detect it means it's just hearsay. It's just random people saying, hey, I think I got it. But you really only know by your symptoms. It's not something you can test for. So it's such a difficult thing. That same man, his father apparently went blind from it. Now, I don't know what other circumstances there were. I don't know what this man's previous medical history looked like. I don't know if he went drinking immediately after he got sick. I don't know. But I met him, and yeah, he was blind, sure enough. So there is that potentiality. I haven't actually read that on any sort of documented site or heard it from any medical professional, blindness that is, but it is possible. It does attack your nervous system, so it is possible. And then the last one that I had direct contact with, when I posted that I had Ciguatera, a Bahamian woman, reached out to me. She was in Nassau, and she went to this very, very expensive restaurant and paid like $170, something like that, for a whole hog fish. And so that means they cooked the fish whole. And I don't know if she ate the scale, if she ate any of the organs, if she ate maybe some of the head meat or something. That probably would have made it worse. But either way, she ate it, and she had just pretty much all the symptoms. It sounded like it was really wrecking her life. I will try to find and reach back out to her and see how she's recovered and such since then. Um, if it was a night out, she was probably drinking with that meal as well. I don't know if drinking alcohol at the time of when you first get that big dose of Ciguatera makes it worse. Again, there just really isn't a lot of information on here. I hope I can only debunk at least, the flies and the ants and the coin myths, and try to give you some other ones. So that's pretty much what I know on Ciguatera in the Bahamas. The last thing I'll end with is Ciguatera in other places in the world. Now, it has been linked. There are certain tropical islands that never had Ciguatera, and then effectively, they want to say the white man came and then it got there, but what I think it really was more is civilization came, and gasoline engines, started polluting, or diesel engines, or, big clunking oil tankers started, really hurting the coral reefs. And I think it allowed the ciguatoxin to get in. It's possible. Who knows? It might even grow on the bottom of ships, in certain circumstances. So it might literally have gotten transported around the world by human travel. But I believe there is documentation about Captain Cook's crew getting Ciguatera and such. So that might be debunked. Again, loved it. If you know more about that, please shoot me a comment. Other things I know about Ciguatera and other things to watch out for is it is in most places in the world where there is coral. Fiji and Tahiti are supposed to be some of the worst places for it. And if you look at different maps of where Ciguatera is, you'll notice that they're all kind of a little different. They all definitely cover the Bahamas, no doubt about that. And they all cover the east coast of Florida that I'm on. They don't seem to cover the west coast, so I'd be interested to know, is there just no coral on the west coast? Is that why? But anyway, when I was spearfishing around the world and I was up in Cairns, Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, that was talked about quite a bit. Not like it's talked about in the Bahamas, though. And again, they mostly told me if you spear a king mackerel over 20 kilos, or don't do that. Don't spear these certain species that are too big. I never had any problems with Ciguatera while I was up there. I didn't meet anybody with problems with Ciguatera while I was up there. I have met a couple Spiros that have gotten Ciguatera in Indonesia and in the, like the Marshall Islands and stuff like that. And I have heard that it's really bad. I believe it is the Marshall Islands, but islands where they did bomb testing in the, or strafing and things like that. And that would stand to reason that they bombed a coral reef. The coral got all messed up, and this particular microalgae was able to just grab hold of it. So that would stand to reason. But yeah, that pretty much closes what I know about it. So in conclusion for everybody, don't be afraid of eating fish. Ask what it is. I can't recommend schoolmaster snapper. That's the one I can't recommend. But the truth is I bet you if you ate the right schoolmaster snapper at the right reef, and you could see that it was all healthy and vibrant, it would stand to reason that it would actually be a good fish. That would be maybe something I should do some research on. Remember that talk to the locals. That's really the best one. If you can feed it to a cat or a dog, and notice their symptoms or lack thereof, that's not a bad one either. But really, it is such a one in a million, not a million, but one in a, I don't know, too many thousands, too much to worry about. I recommend you still go out there and still eat some fish to enjoy it. Myself, like many other fishermen who have gotten it, I'll report saying, yep, I still went out and ate fish. It's not worth it enough to stop eating it. It's one of those things just to, hey, be aware of. This coming season, like I said, I'm going to be trying the activated charcoal. I am not willingly going to give myself Ciguatera to try to see if that will work. But I may take it as a daily supplement, or I may take it only if I do notice any symptoms of it. So stay tuned for that. And otherwise, thanks for listening. If you have any questions about this, feel free to message me. Feel free, especially if you have any other information, throw up a comment. I do ask, please try to keep it factual. And if you can, put a link in there to support your side of it. I really want to try to minimize the amount of myths going around here. So thanks for listening. And for the next episode coming up, it'll be episode 8, How I Find Spearfishing Spots. I'll tell you guys all about what I use, way ahead of time before I ever get to a region, online using apps and such, how sailing has helped me to find many of my best spots now recently, what spots I like to go to for what fish, the conditions of the spot that I want, getting help from the locals, sheer luck, and just being out there all day, using my sailboat itself to find the spots, and people giving me their spots, but then I can't ever share them. So pros and cons to each one. I hope you stay tuned and listen. Otherwise, thanks for listening for this podcast at the helm with me, Adventure Man Dan, and I'll see you on the next adventure. If you enjoyed this podcast episode and were either inspired, entertained, or maybe even you learned something, please consider supporting Adventure Man Dan on Patreon. You'll get exclusive early access to my YouTube videos and epic mentories, Facebook posts, and other content sometimes months before the general public, as well as tons of extra not seen anywhere else. And it can cost as low as $3, but helps me out tremendously. Also, if you haven't yet, check out my Adventure Man Dan YouTube channel for the full videos of my epic adventures, that I've edited so far. Bear with me as I continue to get caught up, but there's some great content on there already, as well as more to come. Or, if you like to do a bit of reading, take a look at the official Adventure Man Dan Facebook page. There's tons of posts dating way back to the inception of Adventure Man Dan, and it's easily the most complete and accurate archive of my adventures so far. And if you still want more, why not follow me on Instagram at adventureman_Dan, where I post some amazing, albeit random photos from my travels around the world. And of course, you can always check out my website, www.adventuremandan.life, as a central resource for all my content and the best way to get a hold of me. Or if you're interested in literally joining the crew aboard Adventureborn, I have a whole page on the website dedicated to just that. Go ahead and check it out. Alright, well, you've made it to the very end. Now get out and go start your own adventure.